to introduce you to Azu's words, his language, his kind and precise thinking, and we'll go on from there. So Azu writes, one finds good commentary on the above subject, dotted sometimes overtly, and other times very subtly within Owanto's artistic oeuvre, particularly in this project, Dance With Me. The iconographic references reveal a self of nostalgia due to the remixing of historic documents and family archives to create new pictures, shattering any sense of the perspectival truth of straight photographic images. There is free play of signs, linearity succumbs to plurality, and different topias collapse into one surface, like the mythical Parharias veil. In these works, the center is often displaced by seemingly deliberate compositional strategy. Everything seems planted in an almost mature state, as if to provoke a prochronic time, but quickly contrasted by images of movement, religious procession, airplanes in flight, and text inviting us to come through for real, a warm gesture that compels one also to move. It's not working. Sorry, my slides aren't working. So maybe we can start with Azu telling us a little bit about himself, how you began your work, how did this journey for you all begin?
Thank you very much, Helen. Thank you to all the guests who are here listening to this talk today. I think this is a really prescient moment to have a conversation, a global conversation around visual culture, if you like, around, especially at this particular moment in history. Just to dial back to the quote that you read from the work of Owanto, it's from a body of work, a series of work actually, not just one, that talks about memory, history, identity, and all of the various histories that we carry with us. And Owanto comes from a biracial heritage. So she's very aware of the politics of identity. And I think this particular period is such a complex, difficult period for everyone to understand and to articulate our feelings. And the beauty of that quote, or the interesting thing that I find even now looking back at it, is the fact that there's agency within the individual to be able to do something, you know, personable and solitary, to be able to sort of navigate and push through and power through the problematics around all of these complex issues of identity, of politics, of our role and our place in the world. So as you and I discussed earlier on, it becomes a performative space where we can express ourselves through the body, through dance, through emotion. And the beautiful thing about how we situate all of that through images is the work that Owanto has produced in that series, where she's got a video, she's got archival images, and she's got an installation that says "Come Through for Real." So my history into the art world really is from a fan base. I came in from someone who just really appreciated the power and the role of art, and particularly photography, to be able to tell immediate stories about contemporary life, and also to be able to situate the past and the present, and to also project into the future, as we all know. And in 2010, we set up the LagosPhoto Festival, much like what format does, which just a bit younger format was in 2004. And in that time, we really focused our energy on tackling the issues that we felt bedeviled the continent, particularly Afro-pessimism, the idea that Africa is just a hopeless, dark space that with no solutions and no positivity. And you do not replace one cliche with another cliche. We wanted to really bring through and shine through stories that create more better understanding. The work that was made with what I like to say conviction and competence. And so it wasn't about sort of showing smiley happy people or replacing poverty porn with photos of wealthy people splashing money and living the high life. That's another problem in itself. We wanted to find a middle road. We wanted to also be dialogical to make sure that the narratives that we support do not exclude anyone. And the one singular determinant in everything that I've done in my work as a curator and art director has always been about creating dialogue between gender, between races, between peoples, and really finding the commonality in all of these narratives. I mean, I'm very much influenced by the work of Claude Levi-Strauss and his research around Amazonian cultures and how that formal structuralism creates and builds identity. I'm also interested in how that contrasts with the idea of the individual, and coming back to the topic of the conversation today, how personal becomes political. So I hope by the end of the conversation, we understand we're able to resolve sort of the tension between the political and the personal and the structural, and that is how we create community, especially through photography. We created an informal photo community that really supports the narrative that we hope to push through and push forward into the wider society.
Azu, we're going to be having a very long conversation because I've literally just published an artist book about the ontology of the Amerindians. So I've just myself started really delving into Claude Levi-Strauss's work as well. Here we have this amazing photograph by Christina de Medel that I thought this work really started to encapsulate what you were talking about before of like reclaiming images of ourselves that do not fit into this very narrow narrative that we've been given and been presented to by the West. And I remember being in a very woke artist group where the very feminist artists were making fun of these like fashion shows, these beauty pageants, and was sort of scoffing and saying, well, I can't believe anyone bothers to watch those anymore. And it really hurt me, because I remember as a young girl being so excited when Miss Trinidad won the Miss World, or was it the Miss Universe? Because it was the first time that a young woman like myself, a girl, had seen a Black woman in such a beautiful stage, when usually you see, like, I see myself represented in in an abject way, famines and all this sort of negative imagery which encodes negative values in yourself. So that really, that movement you talked about of reclaiming really spoke to me. And this image in particular of just a young girl, maybe you can say something about it. Can you see it?
think you might need to move the slides along, Helen.
Yeah, I'm moving them now.
Brilliant.
Can you see?
Yes.
Christina de Medel.
Yes. Thank you.
I don't think Azu can see.
I don't see it actually. Sorry.
Azu, I think the viewers can see, so I don't know if you remember the works.
I have access to the slide actually.
Wait, no, here you go, look.
Oh, there we go. Okay, that's an interesting one. And so that image was actually that image was made in 2015 in Lagos in Nigeria when Christina visited the LagosPhoto Festival in that year. And we introduced her to the shrine. We went out there to the shrine. She met Seun Kuti and Femi Kuti, and we all had a great time. And we just started talking about the history of Fela Kuti's history and how in 1977 the military and soldiers came over to his house, 1,000 soldiers that burnt down his house and killed his mom, basically. And there's an iconic story about, of course, there's a famous story of how his mom was chucked through the window. And so Christina reappropriates that narrative by reversing the roles. And so the soldiers are being chucked through the window, and the mom is sort of looking out at the soldiers sort of bouncing in the air. And so it's a way, the thing, images are never innocent. There's so much, they carry so much electrical charge and so much weight of history that we can construct realities, and then this reality becomes relevant in the moment. And a lot of young Nigerians today, a lot of young Africans today do not even know that story of Fela Kuti and his mom, and the fact that she was a feminist icon, one of the most important women in the history of Africa. She was a suffragist. She led a lot of demonstrations against colonialism. She was a real thorn on the flesh of the leaders at the time who were corrupted by the power that they'd inherited. So she was a very important person in history, and people just don't know this. But through the work of Christina, staging this reality, that narrative became more relevant in today. And so that's what images, that's the power of images. They really can situate history in the present and make it really meaningful to an unwitting audience. It seeps in, gradually and insidiously.
I've got Alfredo Jar's image up now.
Oh, yes.
You don't have it. With a quote from him, it was a barbaric indifference.
The title of that body of work is called Searching for Africa in Life, and it constitutes 2,128 images of Life magazine covers. It's hard for people today to understand how influential Life magazine was at the time. At the peak, they were circulating, I think it was about 2 million magazines each week. Circulation was important. This was before you had the internet, and it was one of the most powerful sources of news. And Life magazine's Henry Luce's company motto was to say, to see life, to see the world, to bear witness to great events, to bring the world to your doorstep. And over the course of 60 years, there are just a handful of stories or covers that relate to Africa, and where you find them, they're pathetic images that uphold the most vile, the most odious cliches about Africa. And so you begin to wonder how the second largest continent is completely obfuscated in the most important news magazine at the time. And not just news magazine, but also cultural magazine. And so Alfredo's installation of 4-panel production really is one of my favorite pieces that subtly, without being aggressive, without being didactic, just presents the reality for you to contend with and to contemplate. Because I think the most powerful work is what that's really not didactic, that really presents the evidence and allows you to feel and to engage your own senses to arrive at whatever conclusion you choose to arrive at, having witnessed the evidence or the performance or the experience, as it were.
I 100% agree with you, Azu. I love his work. I love that entire project. We think fake news is something that arrived with Facebook. It's been with us all along. You know, and I think what's happened now is we have the word and we have the conceptual understanding and the language now to talk about this very complex issue. I've got now the work called Diamond Matters up.
Matters, yeah.
Which I'm just going to scroll through because again, it illustrates what we're saying about there's one image for us and there's another image for people who hold the power, and these things are linked through, you know, economics, and I'll just scroll through now so everyone can slowly see this narrative.
Well, I think Diamond Matters by Kadir van Lohausen is one of those that I really like to present when I give talks about photography and inviting foreign photographers to the continent to tell stories about that they are unfamiliar with and that they are sort of curious about. You know, I don't believe that I cannot tell a story about Brazil, or that, you know, or Dutch photography cannot come to Africa to tell a story. I'm not against hybrid or cross-cultural dialogue, but I mean, when you're coming, you take the time to understand the situation and to do justice to the narrative and not be quick about it. And Diamond Matters by Kadir van Lohausen is a perfect teachable example about staying with the story and understanding the story and all the layers that relate to that story. And so it's really, he tracks the diamond trade from the mines in Congo and all of Africa to Asia, where they're polished, and all the systems that uphold the trade. And then it culminates with the very last picture of a diamond party, where there's a nude lady on a table with sushi and on her with a, and you know, yeah, it's just incredible, remarkable story. And this is what we are about. We're not against stories that sort of tell the reality of what's going on, but we want those stories to be layered so that we can find intervention in various sectors of society that are meaningful and impactful, rather than just say, this is how it is in Africa, they're killing themselves over diamonds. No, we want to tell the story and follow the story through, so everyone who is culpable and everyone who has a responsibility can own up to it, rather than just leave it at the footsteps of the most vulnerable and the most helpless, if you like.
That's right, and this image also really really impacted on me as well, for is something I talk about a lot. It's the treatment of the young woman who is not a person of color and is lying there in this really very difficult to process way. She is literally just a slab of meat, and it sort of really feeds to the wider understanding and dialogue of how it's not just about how you treat people in Africa, it's about how you treat everyone around you. And again, going back to the personal is political, how you treat people in your everyday life. And that's a political statement in itself.
Yeah, I mean, the color coding, as it were, becomes very distracting. It becomes easy to shut down, easy to ameliorate, and easy to fix. You know, I mean, they use the same formula all the time. You know, the head, you always get someone, a gatekeeper, a person of color, to, you know, to act like, look, there are no problems here. You see it in the UK. I mean, you see it all the time. The next, I mean, it's like who's the head of the Minister for Home Affairs, the home, you know.
Oh, pretty.
And so, but these are the things we should be aware of. It's not about color. It's about
that's right.
And it's about how these systems perpetuated into society. So we mustn't allow ourselves to be distracted by the color, you know, narrative, because it really beclouds the true gender.
Yes.
Can I just ask a quick question before we move on from this photograph? One of the audience has asked, just if you could repeat the photographer's name for the Diamond Matters work.
Yeah, Van Lohausen, Dutch photographer. Kadir, it's A-A-D-I-R, Van, E-N, Lohausen, L-O, yeah.
Brilliant, thank you very much.
Debbie, maybe we can put it in the chat.
It has already been done. One of our amazing attendees has already done it for us. Thank you very much, Iris. I'm going to disappear again, let you carry on.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, now we have a photo about your amazing foundation. And this, I really wanted to bring out all the invisible work that art organizations and art institutions do that a lot of people don't understand. A lot of people think an art gallery is just a place where artists are showing pretty pictures for rich people. And so, hey, I wanted you to say a few words of your foundation, and we'll showcase the sort of initiatives that spin like a web out of, you know, this one physical building.
Yes, thank you very much. I'd love to say two things about that. Number one, we all know over the last 10 years, the rise of the biennales and the rise of the art fairs. They had the pre-COVID became the most significant spaces for the novice or the neophyte to get engaged with art. And that became really problematic because these commercial spaces have a very commercialized agenda. And over the last 10 years, I would argue that the art market sort of overtook the art world, if you like. Mm-hmm. And so artists were sort of almost factory producing work for these biennales that come in every you know, there's one in every city or all over the world, and the art fairs that come every 4 months or something. And so art spaces like Format and Quad and the African Artists Foundation, these are spaces that are non-commercial spaces that have sort of no commercial agenda at all, other than just providing a culture safe zone for artists of all background, every social class. Every sexuality is not a problem. Just to come in and express yourself, to be dialogical, to find people that you want to share ideas with, you want to engage with, without any sort of end product. You know, this isn't about, well, you need to be doing this at the end of this or whatever. We've got a table tennis table at the back. We've got always a resident artist from Senegal or from South Africa or Gabon or the UK or wherever to come in, who's always in that space to share, who wants to meet other artists, who's interested in meeting writers, filmmakers, whatever. And this is the key to keeping the cultural spaces going, because without these sort of spaces, these informal spaces, it's really difficult for artists to feel like they're part of a community. And the structures, as I say, that we need to sustain this movement, this are not found in the commercial spaces, because the commercial spaces have to be by nature exclusive. That is a talk. Yeah, I'd love to see. Oh yeah, we've got more women than men, I think, on that panel. Makes me happy. Yes, we're also very aware of the role of women in society and making sure that the voices of women are heard. And you know, we actually design specific projects to encourage women in photography, especially. I believe Louise has been involved in one of our projects around photography. So we have to be deliberate about certain aspects of our programming to be able to embrace society as a whole.
Oh, can you see? The slide that's up on the moment is a Women Through the Lens, the mentorship program.
Oh, yes. Yes.
The photography workshop is now on, seeing lots of women. And this is slightly different. This is something that I'm very passionate about, because I'm very interested in that moment where young people become encoded with the values of their culture. And this says youth empowerment through contemporary art.
Yes, I see that. Oh yeah, that's a fantastic project we launched in 2014. And the idea was to take, at the time, the federal government announced that they were taking out art and history off the school curriculum because they couldn't find teachers. And this was, you know, I found this to be completely outrageous. You know, to completely delete the most important aspects of our learning, of our culture, of our education from the academic curriculum. And so we applied to the state government to teach art and photography specifically to these state schools that, you know, struggle with this particular problem. Fortunate to get, after much of a follow through, we're very fortunate to get the permission to do this, and we did this every Saturday. And at first it was very slow on uptake because parents, you know, were very skeptical. They were dubious about another extra day of schooling for kids, but it took off, and you know, we had far more students subscribed to the Saturday classes because the school wouldn't allow it to interrupt the normal agenda. And you know, I still meet people because we did this for 4 years. I still meet kids from that period who were massively influenced by the project, and I still think it's one of the most remarkable things that I've been involved in since we set up the African Artists Foundation at LagosPhoto Festival.
This is not a question, but I just want to share with you some of the comments. Actually, people are just saying how beautiful the space looks, how important the work you're doing is, and some have also messaged that how much work you've done over the years for women and equality in the arts and in photography. And I think our audience really understand that. It's really wonderful to hear. So I just wanted to pass on some of those comments about how important equality is and how you're leading on that. And that's really brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you.
And talking about the personal is the political as well, Azu. This slide is now up.
Oh, yes.
I was very intrigued by.
And so we invited 2 Dutch artists, Mel and Just, who produced a really important project in Ghana. It was called Turtle, How to Build a Car in Accra or something like that. I forget the exact name. And I found a book and I was browsing through. And so what they did was they went out to Ghana, to Accra, and they worked out using the local economy, their artists, how to build a car from scrap, from complete, without any sort of prefab. And so I got in touch with them and I said, would you like to come to Lagos and let's think about a creative project, maybe a helicopter or a submarine or something incredible, that basically by going through all the problems of the process of building that automobile or that product, we understand all the problems in the layers in society and how to get there. In the end, it took about maybe a year of back and forth discussions, and they came down to Lagos, and we completely scrapped the idea about building another vehicle or another mobile transport system, and we focused on the criminal justice system. And it turned out that in Nigeria, that we have people waiting for 5, 6, 7 years, awaiting trial in our criminal justice system. And this was actually quite new to me. I didn't even know how terrible the judicial system was in the country. And these two artists worked with the local community, worked with the prison reform commission, and we created a play with the prisoners who were awaiting trial. And we staged this sort of, the idea is to stage a performance around the prisoners themselves trying their cases. So, you get the prisoners coming together to listen, to adjudicate in the cases, in each case of that haven't been decided by the formal courts. So I thought it was a remarkable project, and we're still working with the artists. And the idea is to host the festival, to host the performance, or to stage a play during the LagosPhoto Festival in 2020. Basically, it was just about interrogating the criminal justice system in Nigeria and finding solutions to this incredible problem where a guy's crime, if he was guilty, is probably 6 months in jail, but he spent 3 years waiting for trial. And it's just one of those things that that artists can do to sort of create awareness about a topic or about a social situation that is largely on the wider public. Because I didn't even know about it until we got into it. And that's the presentation at the foundation. I think that was in January or February, just before COVID.
Wow. The image now is of the collectors club that you run, and it's hard not to take a breath after listening to you speak about the problems in the justice systems, not just in Africa, might I add, but all over the world. The image of the collectors club, which I've put on now, I wanted to put that in again, another facet to the work you do, which is the importance of using your privilege as a person of color to support and to enter into these markets and to buy and collect and to support the voices of people who are not fairly represented within the wider artistic community. And seeing this image was just really lovely as well.
Thank you, Helen. If you look closely at this image, you'd observe that most people in the audience right there are sort of below 30. They're quite young. It's a very young group. And that's actually a project. That aspect of the Collectors Club is driven by a curatorial assistant, a young curator in training, Philip Fabriero, who who drive this particular project. And the idea is to encourage young people to understand that collecting is political. It's not about, I'm going to wait till I'm wealthy and I can afford to buy this or buy that before I actually participate in supporting the work that artists do, the work that we think is important, the work that I think is important, and building that community so that it doesn't become this thing that is purely monetized by the super wealthy or the super rich or those with this affordable income. You can be coming and find ways to support artists and support collecting. And also it comes down to the idea of, I don't know if we will have the moment to talk about the home museum, which is the theme for LagosPhoto Festival this year, but maybe we leave that for the next, when we move on to that aspect of the conversation. But really it's about the parochial. It's about looking inwards to say, what responsibility as an individual do I have to support creative enterprise around me? And that is not something that you postpone till a later period when you're able. It's something that you participate in, and get involved with. This image is in a very popular beach. The next slide was about, it's what we do with LagosPhoto Festival, where we have our exhibition in public spaces. So this is quite a popular beach resort, and we staged LagosPhoto Festival not just in indoor galleries, but as much as possible we spread out the exhibition across cities, and it becomes completely suffused. We have the slogan, art reclaiming public spaces. It becomes suffused into the community, so that for the whole period of the festival, for the 6-week to 2-month period, photography and visual culture and visual logic and visual thinking and the visual intellect become democratic. Everyone is able to form an opinion and not be taught what to think, to engage with the visual storytelling and the narrative as intended by the photographer or not.
Once again, we can learn a lot from this here in the UK, as one of the problematics that we have, which some brilliant young cultural artists and activists who have a platform called White Cube, and they really speak a lot to this about the democratization of art and the need for it to spread into the communities, for it not to be elitist. And I have to say, I feel as a Trinidadian person that this is something that Black people really understand about working from a position of we, to quote the amazing American artist Carrie Mae Weems. And I think about that a lot, how to work from the position of we. I think that we're on the last slide talking about the wider work that you do, and this was a national art competition.
Yes, it's sort of equivalent of the Turner Prize, if you like. It's open to, I see it right there. I worked it out. So it's
okay.
It's from 2008, we organized this incredible. We had this wonderful platform supported by a local beverage company to really reward local production of art that isn't without any sort of commercial interest. And so it was thematically driven by what we thought was the mood in the country at the time, or the mood in society at the time. And each year we'd reward the winning artists, 3 winning artists, with a financial prize and an exhibition. And I'd just like to tell a story about diversity here that might be inspiring to others. And for the first 3 years, we had 3 winners. And for the first 3 years, we only had men amongst the winners. And in the 4th year, I thought this was really embarrassing. I just could not, abide it, and I thought I had to do something. And I decided it was going to be I went to speak to the jurors, and because I always absorbed myself from I was never involved in the jury. Helen Starr, the famous artist, he was always head of the artistic selection committee, and he headed up the jury for the prize. And we decided we were going to have a conversation about making sure that we had women winners with a National Art Prize. And I just couldn't really do it. I went back home, I thought about it through the night, I couldn't sleep with it, and I just thought it would dilute the essence of the prize and of the meaning of what we're trying to do. And so we, in the next year, the fourth year, we approached women artists specifically and said, we want you to apply. We would love to be involved. We know the problems in you applying. We will help you with this. And we did this, and we actually, changed the way we communicated the prize. We made it more gender neutral, if you like. We just changed the narrative and the way we presented the prize. And we sort of phased out the word competition, and we were saying the National Art Prize. And we just sort of softening up the edges a little. First, we had all women apply. We didn't have that before. And in the next year, we had 3 women winners and one guy, because there was a duo, a man and a woman combination, without any sort of quota, if you like. It was just about the way we communicated and the way we approached the promotion of the National Art Prize. So I'm not suggesting that quotas shouldn't be enforced in certain situations, but I'm saying that I think we are not aware of the way we communicate. We are not aware of the way we actually reach out to invite people into our spaces, because sometimes you say, well, we have a poster, we have the communication out there, they should apply, but you need to be more conscious of the way the language we use prevents others from actually feeling welcome into that space.
Absolutely.
So a lesson learned, and since that time, we've always had women winners with the contest without any sort of prejudice or preferential treatment, if you like.
And on that really inspiring note, this is what we mean by making transformational change. We go through to talking, as Azu said to me, you like working and thinking about the future. And this is a quote I put at the top, which is on the floor of the British Museum of all places, and showcasing, all these artifacts, which of course the people from the countries who made these artifacts are not going to be walking through and absorbing their own knowledge from their own cultures. So I thought that would be a nice intro into your rapid response restitution project.
Thank you. Demands for the restitution of cultural heritage dates back to the 70s. That's not a new thing at all. And in 2017, Emmanuel Macron commissioned the research into restitution. Benedict Savoy and Helen Starr, the Senegalese French philosopher, and the historian Benedict Savoy produced this incredible report around restitution of cultural heritage. And since that time, the topic of restitution has come back to the forefront of cultural thinking and it's become the leading conversation in the art world. And before COVID, it was the hottest topic. And I was really interested in how we could move this conversation forward, because again, if we leave it to the politicians and if we leave it to the commercial industry world or the art world as it were at the time, I was very conscious of the fact that it will be overtaken by commercial interests. We'd have artists making paintings with like bleeding bronzes on their head and, like typical, predictable work that really does not shift the dial. that just normalizes the conversation. And I thought about what expanded normative approach can we use to really push the boundary of the conversation? What can we do in the interregnum between the period when politicians are politicking and museum directors are pontificating and being grand, as they like to do? And what can we do in the immediate period? And I thought photography, that's the magic of photography, because till this day, no one on the part of the globe is actually aware of what's out there. You know, we don't actually know what's out there. We just know that we've been looted and some of it collected appropriately or inappropriately, but we don't actually know because these objects are stored in vaults and museums in all over Europe and America. Just to give you an example, the British Museum in London holds 70,000 objects from Africa. The World Museum in Vienna has 37,000 objects. The Humboldt Forum that is just opening has 75,000. And there are approximately 500,000 of these objects spread across Europe. And if this is a conversation that in my lifetime, I do not anticipate that we're going to have resolved. But through photography, we can turn the gaze inwards and begin to explore what is left behind. How do we create an awareness and develop the habits to appreciate, to engage with our own cultural heritage and to build a new heritage? And are we interested in these superfluous museums that are all over the world, you know, that are unsustainable, that are so expensive to maintain, that are monuments to the vanity of the community and the architect, but do not actually feed the community? These are things that are not only un-African, it's unsustainable in the new ecology of the world today. So I started thinking about what we could do to understand the next steps in addressing restitution as a topic, and how we can play the roles of agents and not victims in this space, rather than waiting for it to happen. Immediately begin to engage with cultural heritage and find out what the, I feel like, ground zero of the situation is. So I invited one of the most interesting curators who's actually worked on this topic, Dr. Clementine Delis. She was the director of the Ethnographic Museum in Frankfurt for 5 years. And in that time, she invited curators and artists from all over the world, especially from Africa, to work with those objects, to interrogate those objects, and to create new meanings for these ethnographic objects, and to find new ecology within these objects, and to find new ways for us to imagine their value, you know, in society. And so I invited her to do this research with me, and we traveled all across the country, visiting various museums in Nigeria, and we come up with the idea of the Home Museum. And the Home Museum really is about making everyone a collector. You know, we've all inherited objects of virtue, as we like to call it. It might be a pair of glasses that your grandfather gave to you. He bought it at a store that does not exist anymore. We can investigate our collective history through these objects. It could be a kettle, it could be a Benin bronze sculpture, it could be all of these objects that we think and we hold there. Just make a photo with your iPhone and share with us, and we can begin to build a new history through the Home Museum. And that's really the project that I'm working on that excites me at this moment, because I'm not interested in waiting. I'm interested in taking a side road to the main road of restitution without being a victim or without playing the subservient role of the guy waiting for these things to be handed to him. We have these objects here. What are we doing to appreciate it, value them, collect them? And what kind of museum do we see, do we imagine these objects should be housed? And how should they be integrated into society? Because the other thing that the Following Sun, the Benedict Savoy report focused on was the circulation of these objects. What's the meaning of these objects in today's society? You know, because culture is not static. You know, everything evolves. We need to evolve our knowledge. We need to evolve. We need to also see what we can learn, new ecology through these objects. So that's the project, the Home Museum Rapid Response Restitution.
So that really beautifully links to the quote, the master's tools cannot dismantle the master's house. What you're saying right here is you're creating your own tool to build your own house and not waiting, because you don't need to. You know how to take these tools and you know how to use your knowledge and you know how to build your own house, your own virtual space, which will be so beautiful and so meaningful and so alive as well and of the now. So
yeah, I like that. I love it. Create one too. That's really what it's about. And you don't need to be a professional photographer. You don't need to have an expensive camera. All you need is a smartphone. Make a picture of the object. Let them hold there. Let's begin to interrogate. Can you imagine, say, a young man who observes like a sculpture or a tool that is completely incongruous to what he knows, or his father worked on the railroads in Congo in the 20s and the late 19th century or something, and he passed on these objects to him and he doesn't understand what they mean. He makes a picture of it, he shares it with us. We begin to have a conversation about these objects, about our history, about those. Mm-hmm. You know, he can understand why he might be a little bit darker than his cousins. Maybe there's other narratives that have been hidden or obscured to him through these, how objects can begin to tell stories of identity in an expanded personal narrative. And it's incredible the sort of results that we're getting so far. It's just opening up, not Pandora's box, but opening up so many veins and so many metabolic pathways that are. Which
is, and it's about this democratization process happening, and there's no real gatekeeper either, it's a really decentralized and very poignant and beautiful project, which also has its marketing built in as well, because that's the really clever bit as well, Azu. Everyone who puts an object in will tell their family, and their family will go in to see their family's object, and they will discover other objects on the site. And this is how, I can feel negritude just flowing from this idea out, and can't wait myself to see it up and running, and spending a lot of time myself just looking through Africa through the eyes of its own people.
Can you imagine the transcontinental slave trade, the journey from Africa to Barbados, to Trinidad, to Jamaica, to the rest of Europe? I mean, these our brothers and our ancestors and our forebears, they traveled with objects that are held dear to them. And then 400 years down the line, 300 years down the line, these objects survive. They tell a story, a history that it could be a notebook, it could be a pen, it could be a sculpture, it could be anything, a key or a stool. Through these objects, we begin to create a new culture, a new history, a new understanding of the things that we have lost and the things that we're looking to imagine for the future. And I do not think that we need to be worried about objects that are already in these museums. We need to also think about how there's so much low tech and so many codes in these objects that we are not, able to access. For example, we went to a museum, in one of the museums we visited I think it was in Benin City, there was a beautiful sculpture, and I thought, wow, this is just so much fun, but it was a toy. It was just a little thing with a that does, you know, but no one tells you about toys that, you know, these African toys 500 years ago for their kids to have fun. Everything is about the religion and the worship and the sperm and the blood and the rituals. Guys just want to play. We learn and we evolve knowledge through play. And within those objects of play and fun, there is so much that has been passed on, but either diluted, attenuated, but we can track them back to these objects, these playthings that our forebears made and allowed us to share history, share language, share knowledge. There is also technology like convection current, you know, the fish traps that you've seen there, you know, the woven in opposite directions, so that when you go through when you pass the trap through the river, it creates a kind of convection current that sucks the fish in, and then you fish for just what you need ecologically. So we need to be thinking, this is the future, this is what we need to be engaging, an ecological way of engaging with our community. You know, these fish traps, you fish, your community is able to eat what you fish, and just manage your ecosystem in a sustainable way. You know, these are the things, these low-tech objects contain so much incredible technology that is obscure to us because we just want to buy the fishing net that has been passed on by people with a different culture. They want to fish and sell and distribute and freeze and take to the next village. This is enough for it. Everyone grab a fish trap, go to the river, grab yours, and in 5 minutes you have a fish and you go eat and you cook it. It's fresh, it's healthy. You know, these are some of the things around the circular economy that we can begin to engage with in our communities, in our locales, and begin to think about new ways of living, you know, more sustainable ways of living beyond that's been passed to us and we've inherited.
I wrote an essay about music as a form of technology, you know, that people don't think of music as technology. They just think, oh, it's just, you know, music. And yet, you know, you can pop a pill to make you feel better, but you can also listen to music to make you feel better, you know. And one of the things that I always think about the amazingness of us is how, you know, the slaves managed to keep their voice and their movement and their song, which they brought to Trinidad, where it lived in Trinidad, Orisha. And I have a friend called Juan Ogogumbe, who his entire work is about refinding the lost song cycles of his particular people in Africa, and how, working with a mathematician, he was able to refine them because the beats and rhythms were kept by people in Trinidad. And so this idea as well, for me as a descendant of slavery, that we were able to also keep something precious to my forebears alive, which was destroyed in Africa through Christianity and Islam. So again,
that's such a great point, Helen. I really like that. The second phase of the restitution project is the oratic. And we're hoping that, you know, we can tap into the knowledge from our grands, the elders in the community, to begin to understand, what does this object mean?
yes.
Can you we want to start recording and finding these archives and these living archives, and, you know, locating them and translocating them, and you know, creating these sort of incongruous associations, because we just don't know what we'll find. We don't want to, this is not an ethnographic project where we begin to say, oh, this is from Papua New Guinea and China, or this, and begin to create these topologies that are that are stood behind the times. You know, we're not interested in going back in that way. We're rather interested in those incongruous associations that we can make that really speak to the evolution of language, the evolution of culture, the evolution of these objects in society. That's really what's exciting. I know if you think about it, for the longest time, or I'd say over the last 4 or 5 years even, the dominant thematic narrative, especially with film and photography around contemporary visual culture in relation to African diaspora, was dominated by Afrofuturism, if you like, for want of a better word. So it's the idea that the present is problematic, want to imagine a future that blends in literature, sci-fi, you know, all manner of technology to create a better imagined, you know. This is a time for that future. This is a time that we test those narratives around Afrofuturism to see if it actually is up to scrutiny.
Azu, I've got an Afrofuturist project planned for next year with a beautiful Black hijabi artist, Somalian amazingness called Salma Noor, because really I'm also so interested in this. For me, I talk about all of this in terms of this concept around emergence theory and poiesis and autopoiesis, this idea that things that are disparate or different, when brought together, something new emerges that's different from everything else, and looking towards the future and seeing what this new thing is what's really exciting to me at the moment. And you know, I work a lot with technology like VR and augmented reality and gaming, and really like trying to give these technologies to people of color. So my next 2 projects are with Salma, an amazing artist who is called Danielle Braithwaite Shirley, who is a trans activist and just beautiful person. But part of it is I just want to see what they make. You know, it's not even because they're Black or unrepresented or minorities. I just know if I give them these tools that they're going to make something exciting, just because we've not seen what these amazing, brilliant people are going to produce. So, yes.
In the post-COVID situation, you know, as I say, DC and AC, after COVID, I think we all become more willing to embrace digital technology a lot more. I mean, I can see people from Brazil, Spain, Berlin, engage in this discussion without having to fly and pollute the environment and all of those things that we've been doing for the longest time. And so, you know, with these technologies that you speak of, VR, AR, they are evolving at a rate of knots because there's more participation with them. And through increased participation, there's better knowledge of the technology, and there's a better association and integration into the body, into the whole. And then we have a more holistic representation of how, and that's why it becomes very important for Africans and those who feel like they're sort of like playing catch up to the bigger, to participation in the art world, whether it's Latin America or wherever, the Asia, wherever it is, we can create a new virtual reality, a new virtual world where we can begin to engage with these realities and create work that is completely devoid of any sort of gender or racial prejudice. It just, the work is, you know, we don't need to be didactic about it. We just produce the work, we present it, and if people feel it, they feel it. There's no need to play. The identity politics becomes less important at this time, and the work really has a chance to speak for itself. That's a brilliant thing.
I've got a question from Gloria. So Gloria's asked, taking into account the responsibility of one who returns home and generates, nurtures and shapes a collective imaginary with the risk of reinforcing biased stereotypes, who is in charge of giving agency and credit, or you could read permission, to the visitor to talk about another place? Who dictates codes of good manners? Can you repeat that? I'll repeat that. So taking into account the responsibility of one who returns home and generates, nurtures and shapes collective imaginary with the risk of reinforcing biased stereotypes, who is in charge of giving agency and credit, or you could read permission, to the visitor to talk about another place? Who dictates the codes of good manners?
Okay. That's definitely one for me. Because that's literally what we're talking about. What we are talking about is power and systems of power. And so all you need to understand about yourself is that if you are a person who has power, how do you give that power to someone who has less power than yourself, right? So you find someone who is not like you, and you give agency to that person. And you listen and you step back. You eradicate this idea of manners. I get that all the time because I'm a Black woman, so I'm always angry. Whatever I say, and I keep thinking to myself, well, it would be very weird if I'm not angry, because I'm always at the bottom of these lists, right? So if you're expecting me to be like nice and polite, I mean, politeness is the domain of the privileged, right? And yeah, I think if I understand what this lady is saying, she would like to join the fight, but she's concerned about the right way of going forward. And I would just say, just start. If you create a safe space, someone will tell you you've made a misstep. And then you just say, I'm so sorry, I'm still learning. And you begin again. You try again. Just do it. I mean, the worst thing you can do is to not do anything at all.
I'd just like to add, there are communities there are spaces in Lagos, in Nigeria, in Africa, where I am as foreign as a lady from Finland. I'm just like, I mean, I have to be aware of my own privilege, my own narrative, and how I contaminate it as I introduce it. There's a beautiful thing in quantum physics where they say in the Weiner-Heisenberg uncertainty principle, it's impossible to measure this and position at the same time. It's impossible for me to come into a situation that I'm completely foreign to measure it, to measure the disorder in that community without introducing my own specific biases and my own specific, without disrupting the system somehow. I mean, I might go there and say, well, this is what they said to me, and they were very, serious about it. Well, they might be saying all of those things just to please me, or just to piss me off. So we have to be aware of it, and we have to be aware of it, and we have to be humble about it, and we have to be ethical about it. And by that I mean, if you engage with people who've helped you along the way, share, give credit. One of the most interesting projects that I've worked on was, I think it was 4 years ago, I went to the Congo with an artist, Renzo Martins, who is very controversial. He's created this organization in the Congo with a whole bunch of Congolese artists who have completely autodidactic. Well, but brilliant, brilliant thinkers, brilliant artists, brilliant makers. And he tried to get them into an exhibition in Europe because he thought, people have to see this work, but the gallery wouldn't show their work. Except he meant to say it was Renzo Martin and these guys, the CATP from, and he had to do that to get their foot into the door. But after that, he really regretted that decision, and ever since, he's given these artists the credit and the space and the autonomy to present their work in various spaces in New York, in the Netherlands, and in the UK. So it's really about being aware of your specific privilege in that situation and learning how to remove yourself from it. I don't think that anyone's art is such an incredible thing where everyone's contribution, censorship is the biggest sin in art. Everyone's contribution is welcome, but be aware of your own contamination, your own baggage, and what you bring into the situation, and always share the credit. Always be honest about your collaborators. Mongo Park did not discover River Niger. The River Niger has been there. People have been fishing in the river forever, and he was guided along the river by the experts who knew the river, That he created a chart and made it known to the rest of the world does not mean that the majority world did not know the length and breadth of the river. And this is what we're talking about, sharing this credit and allowing ourselves to be completely dialogical in the way we engage with these narratives.
Thank you. Can I just put in from the question? I think you've both answered from a place of humility and awareness of self. And I think reading into Gloria Orzabal's question, there is also that point of when you open up participation, and you might get people participating who come from a place of power and privilege, who participate without that awareness. And Gloria's asked about, should we dictate the codes of good manners? And I can't speak for you, Azu or Helen, but from a person who, a curator, has organised participation, you can't necessarily control that. You can't always enable people to be woke or aware or understanding of the power and privilege they bring. But by supporting and creating a community that shares and reflects things back to them, sometimes we can help people become more aware. I don't know if you agree with that.
I'm going to answer this in a sideways move, Debbie, by moving us along to the next artist.
Fine. I am going to close the questions now, and I shall reappear when the next one appears.
But we're going to tackle that now.
Great.
By the next artist, by asking Azu to answer one of the big elephants in the art world, which is about do white artists have the right to make work based on Black people's pain, or to use Black people's pain as content for their work? Where do we draw the line between not wanting to censor and not wanting to cause pain? And I thought this project by Javier Hirschfield could really speak to that. And I also wanted to hear you, putting you on the spot, Azu, with the I can go first with my opinion if you'd like a break. I personally think you shouldn't make art out of by using people's pain for your content or gratuitous means. I think if you're using other people's culture to explore your own culture or your own whiteness, then it's okay, right? You can, you know, I'm referring specifically to the famous Dana Schutz painting at the Whitney, where I came away thinking that really if Dana Schutz had thought a bit more deeply about the whole thing, I would have liked to see her make a painting of the white woman who was part of it, who's still alive. And I wondered why she didn't interrogate that person who's the only person who's still alive, who was part of the Emmett Till lynching. And that would be something that I would have liked to see. Instead, she just made a bad painting that didn't really add anything to the conversation. So that's my take. Azu? Ooh, I can't hear you.
Sorry. This is really one of those that it's on a case-by-case basis. I find that I shift my position on a case-by-case basis, because for me, I like to think that the responsibility really lies with the artist to be morally aware, and just everything I said, you know, when I was answering the previous question. This is, for example, Harvey Herschel's obfuscating to reveal, reflections of the sheltering pixel. It's just, for me, a fantastic project made by a Spanish artist, photographer, who is able to draw attention to the moral equivalence, but he's actually photographing Black people, Africans, and allowing us to observe this situation where he can go all over Africa and make pictures of people, young kids, underage kids, and he couldn't do that in Spain. And by creating this pixel and pixelating the faces, he forces us to start thinking about that problem, that moral equivalence. And it's so jarring that perhaps for the first time, people who would never have thought about it begin to think, wow, this is absurd. There's Laurence Augator made an incredible project called Tristropic, where she took the work of Claude Levi-Strauss with all of these Amazonians in their situation. She just recreated the same poses with Europeans. Mm-hmm. And then you see the pregnant Amazonian lady laying down on the floor, on a mat with the baby and the dog and everything. And it looks completely bizarre to see this, you know, white people in this completely absurd, almost grotesque. And that's what you can achieve when your ethics and your principles and your work is actually made with the right conviction. It's made with the right approach. It's not cynical. The anathema for me is when you try to make work that is very preachily and you fail. I think everyone should make work about, I don't think anyone should be, you know, prevented, but it's about what you do, how you make it, how you approach it, how do you research the topic, and what the story you're actually telling, because so-called Western civilization is only Western civilization because Caribbeans, Africans, Asians, Chinese have gone out there and contributed and polished it off. And then all of a sudden, we're not able to receive from the rest of the world to promote our own sort of civilization, our sort of knowledge base on the continent because they're not Black enough, or they're not African enough, or they're not local enough. I mean, it becomes absurd. We do ourselves a disservice if we're not able to embrace broader narratives. But it's about who's controlling this narrative and how are you shaping and how you building on knowledge. With the situation in Africa and the majority world nations, it's always about dialing back to they make this in Africa, or they make this, only dialing back to the lowest common denominator. So we're constantly arriving all the time. It's like the narrative does not evolve. So it only evolves when we embrace a wider, broader, deeper narrative. Because to be honest, we're all the same. You know, science proves it, genetics proves it. It's all these false associations.
We're all the same, and we're all different at the same time. And this is I think this is the concept that Western people struggle with.
Yeah.
Really.
Who's controlling the narrative? I think, I mean, as I said, you know, using Harvey's work, many people aren't aware of this law that in Europe, you're not allowed to photograph young kids. Or in Africa, they go to Africa and they photograph young kids. But this is what you can achieve by being, or having what I call the right sensibility to your work. You know, it's once you have the right sensibility, you've embraced the culture, the essence, the meaning, the spirituality, because art is very spiritual. You know, art is it's only powerful when it has got that spiritual charge, that energy that you cannot quantify. And if we begin to create, I mean, I'll give you an example. One of the most important photographers and most meaningful photographers is Vivian Sasson, right? Her work around Black bodies and the way she's always photographed Black bodies is inspired by her foundation growing up as the daughter of a doctor who in Kenya, was it Kenya or was it Tanzania? Kenya, I think it was, yeah. And her formative early years were in Africa. And so that's the foundation of her visual culture, her visual experience. And so that feeds into her creative enterprise in her maturity, and people take away from it because she isn't Black enough or she isn't African enough. It becomes really problematic for us to begin to evolve this collective culture that we're all interested in.
I've just come to the end of a very complex 2-year project where I've been supporting the work of a young white British artist, female, and it's been 3 of us. It's myself at Anna Bunting Branch, and the music, it's for a virtual reality project, and the music was scored by Aliyah Hussein, who comes from the Pakistani background. And I was joking with Anna about how over the past 3 years, we've all been working on this with such intensity, and we're all so different races, different ages, but we never once fell out. And I was saying, I think it's because we're women, I said. And then I thought, no, but I think it's because we're feminists, I said. So that one of my jokes is I only work with feminists, and that includes men.
There are many, there probably are many men feminists in your circle than you can imagine. So yeah, keep it going.
Yes, I really looking through your work, Azu, it really resonated with me, your ideas, your direction, you know, where you're going. And I guess this image captured exactly what you were saying as well. And now we go to this is the project I was talking about with the 3 of us.
Yeah, talk about this. I'm sure everyone wants to hear about what you're working on, Helen. Now
I'll send it to you, don't worry. It was at an exhibition at FACT, who are amazing, amazingly supportive as well. But I put this work, this quote from me in because, you know, it really resonated with me from the snippet I read from you before, and how you spoke about the next artist work. And I just want to, I'll go back and forth because I just want to show you something. We're talking about really thinking about making things accessible and inviting to people. And I was really struck by the positioning of these artworks, because when I curated my own exhibition, when I curate my own exhibitions, I always think in terms of dance. So I always want it to be a space where children can run and people can dance through. So I think a lot of like this invitation, this something in the distance that's saying, come find me, and sort of pulling you through this invitation that you can see here, the sea glittering in the background. And it's just also a way when we think, and I know you think a lot about this as a curator, of how do we bring things in. And I'll let you talk about this amazing project called Dance With Me now.
Oh, I think it's one of those projects that it just stays with you, really. It really just stays with you. I don't know if a lot of people are familiar here with the work of Awanta Berger. She is just the most incredible person, an artist. And she's really, you know, when you make art on this level, you've got to be vulnerable. You've got to be willing to immerse yourself in the work. And she really achieves that by being clever, funny. She really plays with the multiple layers of imagery with the work, and then she pushes forward and makes this incredible installation and comes through for real. It's so, it's a curator's delight, because you can tell maybe 4 or 5 different narratives with this body of work. You know, you can create a chronological timeline for the work, for the series, and it becomes this really somber, slow history of, of Gabon, if you like, and Catholicism in Gabon and religion in Gabon. Then you can rearrange it and it becomes this youthful story of contemporary life and fun in Gabon. So it's one of those that again, if you're interested in teaching curating or teaching photography or one of those sort of things, ideas, it's a great project to utilize as a tool, because it's so layered with so many incredible particular histories within each body of work. And again, you're talking about, it's one of those projects again that embraces archival photography with contemporary photography, with installation, with collage. It's just like so layered and so interesting. If you like, I mean, feel free to share the text with the, I mean, you have the text, right? We can mail it out to guests. It's fine. I want to be glad to.
Both of them?
Oh yes, why
both
not?
Text.
Yeah.
I just love this. I just love this. I just love how you wrote about it. I love, as you said, this breaking of time, this breaking of geography. Again, she puts herself in this work, which is a highly political work. And I think in the bio, it says she was the first woman from Central Africa to show at Venice Biennale. Was that right?
Yeah. She was the first from Gabon to show in Venice, yeah. And she made a beautiful catalog for it. It's a beautiful, beautiful book. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think this is it for our talk, and we can see we're ending with the personal is the political. And yeah, and I just wanted to, we were talking to Debbie before, and I was saying, you know, at the end of this talk, if we can get people to understand that the personal is the political, and And not everyone has to be on the streets, you know, fighting. We need that, but you don't have to be that. And not everyone has to be writing letters and petitions, you know. You can be political if you see an exhibition by an artist whose culture you don't know, or whose thoughts you don't know. You walk through those doors to support that voice, you're going to be political, and this is what we need. So I guess that's
I think it's incredible. What you're saying resonates so much, Helen, because we talked about this before the talk, didn't we? And not everyone can be out protesting. Not everyone feels brave enough or is capable or is able to make that. But also it's about not being complicit, making changes where we can, standing up where we can, going to see art we can, supporting where we can. And as Azu mentioned earlier, with the collectors group of artists and collectors who are under 30, collect, share, support. You don't have to wait until you're older or richer or rich at all or affordable. We can support in so many ways, and sometimes about giving a platform, sharing, and if you know you have power and privilege, to share it, and constantly look at where our biases and privileges lie.
Debbie, Elizabeth Masudia's put her hand up. My beautiful sister-in-law.
We have questions, actually. We do have a range of questions, and we've got some from Facebook. So I've got a question from Deborah from Facebook, she's just asked the name of the photographer that's just been discussed. And then you've already announced that. Thank you very much. And then I've got a couple of questions in the Q&A, and then I'll come to the hand up. So Gloria, who asked some lovely questions earlier, has also asked, going back to an earlier conversation, will Afrofuturism be the weapon to fight and destroy Afropropurism? Will this be reachable to the majority of population, or are we talking again of something restricted for those willing to be active and change? Afropropism, sorry. Gloria's correcting me for saying it wrong. Thank you, Gloria.
Was that a question for me?
What is Afropro? Is that
so
appropriating African culture?
African culture, yes, I would think, yeah. So is it a weapon to destroy the appropriation? It's a big question about appropriation culture.
I can sort of say my understanding of Afrofuturism is about this idea of projecting your consciousness at sort of 500 years into the future, which is where your reality is, and then you visit the earth of now, and you just as how no one in England goes on about how the Romans colonized anymore. People talk about it, but it's like, oh yeah, they colonized. There's no pain. They've moved on, but they still acknowledge the loss. You know, I mean, there's still a loss that's painful. There's no record of any Druidic culture. So for me, Afrofuturism is a mechanism to help us gain perspective of now. I don't know if that makes sense. I mean, how do you appropriate in the future?
I think the question of appropriation is one that's going to it's going to be constantly discussed, about when it is appropriation, when it is absorption, when it is respectful, when it's not. It's something that you mentioned earlier about, you know, checking in about our power and our privilege. And I think the more mindful and aware that people can be, the more they can share and give a platform and not appropriate. But also, as Azu talked about, you can make work about things that aren't connected to you if you're providing a platform and sharing it with honesty and humility. I think it's an ongoing conversation, really, isn't it?
And again, talking about the beautiful Anna, you know, she won the competition to work with me. I hate the word competition in the arts, but the selection or whatever it is. And She worked so hard to get there. And then she shared this entire opportunity, which involved 3 museum shows with a brown artist. And she was clever because the work of the brown artist, Alia, is so amazing that Alia's work took Anna's work to a whole different level. So, you know, when we're talking about sharing power, you're not talking about it as in, oh, you're making a sacrifice. It's like, you need to share because look at the world around us. Does that really?
Yeah. I don't think it's about making a sacrifice. It's about, it's not yours anyway. Share it.
Even beyond that, Debbie, it's like,
yeah,
this thing has to stop because the world, the power has been in the hands of a very small group of powerful people, and they've made an ugly place. So just move, you know, like,
yeah.
we need to fix this.
And I also, like, as you said earlier, it's about controlling the narrative. It's about what narrative you're sharing. It's so important to keep being mindful, going back to that.
And something else that we haven't touched on that is really important to this power structure and dynamic, even up to the point of to the situation of restitution. It's always about the most domestic situation. It's about hosting. It's about hospitality. It's about the very foundation of our humanity. It's about being able to have a conversation, a dialogue, a meal with someone to share. And for the longest time, artists from all over the world, you know, desperate to go to MoMA, to New York, or to the Tate, they just seem to be the pinnacle of your achievement as an artist. And hopefully this sort of mentality is slowly beginning to dissipate and dissolve into the idea that maybe if you're able to show work in the place where you actually produce that work, you know, you've gone out like Richard Moss to the Congo and made these beautiful, incredible photographs, you know, desperate to get it back there for the guy out there to see it. That should be the pinnacle of your achievement as an artist. Not having to share that moment. It's about bringing it to its original situation, the people that gave you such a bread and home and allowed you to make this incredible work. That is what should give you that spark as an artist. Hosting and hospitality, or in the virtual space, talking about Afrofuturism or futurism, the virtual reality in the future. It's everyone can be on this platform now in the digital, and we can create our own reality there. We can test out all the theories and all the ideas that we had around the possibility of various futures, the multiplicity of the multifarious future that we've imagined for ourselves as diasporic people, as people with multiple identities and multiple histories and complex, because we all carry our history with us, right? No one is, you know, pure in that sense. So it becomes this space where we can actually test out these theories in this virtual space. And that's a beautiful thing that, you know, that really excites me for the moment.
Thank you. I've got one more question from Lucy. She says, thank you very much. She really enjoyed today's talk. It's been amazing to hear about your work and your approach. But she's also asked, could you suggest any journals, online publications for getting to know about artists and organisations such as your own in Lagos and Nigeria?
Oh, very interesting. So we're building this new online platform called Art-Based Africa, and we're going to be doing studio visits to artists that are known, artists that I think are important, making great work, and the idea is to actually go behind the scenes where the market does not exist and sit with the artists in their studios on the dining tables to really get into the soul of the artist, to be able to share this and bring it live through screens to the rest of the world. And it's something we're going to be doing on Art-Based Africa in collaboration with my partners in Cape Town, South Africa. There's the Inca Journal that is amazing, that has been ongoing for a while. Yeah, I could make a list that I'll be happy to share. I don't want to forget anyone right now. But I'll be happy to make a list and email it to Debbie and to Helen, and you can share with your networks. I think
Great.
there's a lot of my research now.
Amazing.
Thank you. We'll happily share that. Yes, and Lucy said a list would be brilliant. So I think lots of our audience would happily look through all that and really enjoy looking up people's work. It's been absolutely brilliant today. I've got a couple of statements from Facebook before we wrap up. So Megan Broadmeadow has said it's been super interesting. I think the conscious awareness to invite people and not just accept that certain people are not represented. This was talking about the quotas earlier, about presenting themselves as such a good mantra to live by. And that really resonated with me. I think we've talked about this so much in Britain in the arts. How do we enable more people to become part of the arts world, whether it's in jobs or curating or many layers? And your conversation about reaching out, about inviting people to join in, to be at the table, is so important.
Oh, I have to say about Meg, who did another amazing virtual reality project with me. And she reached out and shared her platform with an amazing young African musician who scored the most exquisite track. So again, you know, and that again made Meg's work, took it up to this other level of complexity and like meaning. So again, you know, it's not that hard. It just needs a bit of mindfulness, a bit of remembering, and a bit of thinking, oh, something's happened to me today. How can I just reach out and discover others who are not like yourself? Because that's exciting.
Yes. So Neve's just rejoined us, and she has been managing Facebook conversation. Thank you very much, Neve. Really appreciate that. I think you seem to be stuck on muted. You're unmuted. Brilliant. Thank you so much for managing that and putting the questions from people from Facebook. Have you got anything else to add?
No. I've kind of sent over all the things from Facebook, but just to say thank you to both Helen and Azu. It's been an amazing talk, and yeah, thank you for everyone to everyone for attending our first one in the live series. It's obviously a different format to normal, but yeah, we've been really happy and hope they're as great going forward.
I think it's a more democratic way of speaking to people and reaching out to people. I would like to thank everyone who's attended and stayed with us for nearly 2 hours. Thank you so much. And thank you for all the chats in the conversation. We're getting some lovely chat now. Peggy Sue, hi Peggy, has just said it's been extremely interesting and she's looking forward to receiving that list, Azu. People are going to follow that up. We need that list from you. People saying that went really quick. Yeah, 2 hours flew by. It was so fascinating and so engaging. People really enjoyed it. It's been absolutely brilliant. I'm gonna, on behalf of everybody else, I would like to give you both a round of applause. Everyone else's videos are switched off, but I know I'm applauding for everyone. It's been absolutely brilliant. I've got some people writing clap clap in the chat.
Thank you
for coming.
Thank you, Quad. Thank you, Louise, Format, all of you. We wouldn't be able to do it without you as our allies. So,
thank you, Azu. It's been brilliant. It's great to live stream from
Azu, I'm coming over.
I think we're all going to be coming over.
I'm coming over. I'll be a little squatter in that garden of yours.
I've shared the link a couple of times to your project. It's just such an inspiring project. Can you just remind us and recap on that as for the open call? And I'll share the link again, because it's just absolutely brilliant that people can take part in this project.
On Prostitution, the Home Museum, please, any object that you find to be incongruous or meaningful and personable, and what we call the objects of virtue, please make a photo of it and send it to us at the Home Museum at LagosPhoto.com, and we will be happy to share and hold this history for posterity, and to build a new way, and to build a democratic intellect, and to build new histories for the next generation. So please jump on it. Thank you.
Thank you all. And keep sharing your photographs of mass isolation with mass isolation format. Just share with us, really. That's the moral of the story. Just share. We want to see what you're doing. Take part. And thank you all for coming today. We shall see you at the next talk, same time next week.